let's talk about what these states of imbalance look like. The intellect, the masculine side of the brain, the left brain hemisphere, if it's continuously engaged and the right side of the brain is not engaged, when you're in chronic left-brained imbalance, this will lead to things like rigid skepticism. Okay? Not real science, but just out-of-control rigid skepticism that becomes like a religion. Okay? You're not willing to look at the evidence even. You actually have a belief system because this is the protocol, this fits in with what, the scientific community is saying is possible, even if there's evidence to the contrary. So rigid skepticism. Scientism, again, this is science as a religion. I like Rupert Sheldrake's talk about this and the book that he's written about science acting as a religion in the modern day. It's no different for all the people who worship science, and again, I realize this information pisses off everybody because most people are in one of these states of brain imbalance or another. The people who worship science and think it's the be-all end-all, they're in a form of left-brain imbalance. The people who, are all super religious and think that their religion is the totality of the truth, they're in right-brain imbalance. This has nothing to do with science or religion. This has to do with truth about what is and what is going on within us and around us. And that can be known. And that's the knowledge that's worth pursuing. That's the knowledge that is most worth pursuing. Knowledge of self and knowledge of what is taking place in the realm in which the self operates. If we don't know that, we don't know anything. All other pursuits of knowledge are secondary to that. Not to say that they're not worth pursuing at all. I'm saying knowledge of self and the universe are worth pursuing first. And the knowledge of self has to come first. And understanding the brain and how it operates, the general ways that it operates, you can get lost in the details and the specifics because there's so much about the brain we do know and don't know, more about it that we don't know. And I'm going to get into this in future shows. I promise people I'll be getting into the origins of humanity, the origins of the control system, the origins of evil, the origins of psychopathy, and telling that horror story. And a lot of people aren't going to like that, and it's going to maybe even shut some people down. But I've prepared the way with all these 140 some odd podcasts, and now it's time to start speculating a bit about what may have led to the cause of this human condition that we're in, this sick condition. Because until you can acknowledge the condition, many people are not even ready to hear what the causal factors may have been. Because of what it's going to force us to reevaluate our entire belief system about what happened here in the ancient past. And what has traumatized us to the extent that we are traumatized that we can't seem to get out of this condition. We have to bring that trauma to the surface, and that has to be done by looking without fear into what may very well have occurred here. So back to the slides. These polarization dialectics or mind control techniques work by keeping people in one form of brain imbalance or another. So continuing with what the intellect out of control leads to, rigid skepticism, scientism, science as a religion, atheism. And again, what I'm talking about here is just thinking that man is the highest power in creation. If you want to really boil it down, that's all atheism is. It's a belief system that there's nothing other than man. That we're the best and brightest, we're the highest source of intelligence in all of creation. And atheists don't believe in natural law. And there's nothing to believe in natural law. They reject that notion that there is an intelligent guiding force that not only created the universe, but is actually governing the decisions that we're being given the result of the free will choices that we make by this dynamic, governing, intelligent, creative force. They don't want to accept that, because man could just do whatever he wants unchallenged, and right and wrong are just constructs of man's mind, And it's sick. It's sick thinking. It's totally left brain imbalance. Someone who thinks like that is ill. They may not know that they're ill, but they're ill. You know, there's a force that sets the galaxies in motion. There's a force that sets the planets and the stars in motion. That force is the same force that ultimately governs the consequences of behavior. That people think they're separate from those laws? That there's laws governing everything that's operating in creation except them? Everything else is governed by law, except man. You know, man can make up whatever he wants, whether it's right or wrong. Do it, there's no consequences. Now, good luck with that. And this is what many atheists think. I'm not telling you to go believe in some religious god. What I consider as the creative force is something so infinitely more complex and majestic and intelligent and creative and powerful than anything that any religion has ever spoken of. That concept that I hold in my mind, that what religions have brought it down into is an insult to that force. And make no mistake about it, no man or group of men is it. We may be a tiny, infinitesimally tiny part of it. That's not to say that we're not an important part of it, but, basically what atheists are claiming is that man is the authority. You know, that there's no higher power that's governing what we're doing here. Well, I think that's extreme short-sightedness, it's arrogance, it's ego run unchecked, which is what the left brain is all about. And when we engage in these chronically left-brained dominant ideologies that have no bearing in truth, it leads to authoritarianism. Because if there's no higher power than man, then hey, man can do whatever he wants. We can get to make up morality. That's a construct of man that doesn't exist in nature, you know? That's what most people think. You just do that experiment. Go ask people, is there such a thing as objective right and wrong that exists in nature? Or just ask them, they don't even understand what the word objective means. Just say, if all humans suddenly disappeared from existence, there was no Earth, let's say. The Earth just vanished along with everybody on it. And there was nothing where the third planet from our sun and our solar system was in a flash, in an instant. Would right and wrong still exist? Most people will tell you no, that it's dependent on man. They actually believe that. And this concept of moral relativism is what has led to the current police state. And this is what people have to understand. They need to understand it. If they want to get out of the police state. For some reason, people seem to love being kept pets. You know, they want a police state. That's the most amazing thing about this whole thing, is that people actually want to be free. Well, that don't want to be free. They actually want to be enslaved. Well, guess what? That's all well and great, but please take that somewhere else, because there are people here that do want to be free, and you have no right. You have no right in your ignorance to be allowing this police state to come on unchecked, and therefore putting people that don't want to be in that cage with you in there with you. Make no mistake, you have no such right. You have no such right. People who think, people have the right to think anything they want, including that slavery is okay. Absolutely wrong. You have a right to think anything you want as long as you're not advocating that other people have violence done to them and be held in slavery. Once your thoughts go there, you have no right to think that. And I'll tell you what, there are people who will openly come out and admit, I don't care if there's slavery. I'll do nothing. Members of my own family admit this. And seem to be proud of it, wearing it like a badge of honor. See the police state coming on and say, I don't care. And these people have children. They have grandchildren. And people don't think people are sick, that this is an illness. That this is an illness born of total imbalance of the brain and the heart. We need to understand it's an illness. So that's what happens if the left side of the brain is in balance. Let's move to the right side of the brain. Okay? The feminine side of the brain, the intuitive part of the brain, the creative part. What happens when it becomes chronically dominant? Chronically imbalanced. We're constantly using those aspects of the brain, but we're not exercising the left brain. We're not thinking logically. We're not looking into truth discovery methods, of which the scientific method is perfectly a valid one. You know, we want to just let other people do whatever they want, never challenge them. You know, never openly say, hey, what you're doing is wrong. You have no right to do this. Not standing up for ourselves, not standing up for our rights. Believing in anything. Any new age mumbo jumbo that comes down the pike, I believe it and I start trying to practice it. You know, this is all forms of right brain imbalance. So this state of right-brained hemispherical imbalance can lead to total naivete. You're not streetwise. Okay? Being very naive like a child. And that's what the whole nanny state control system wants. They want people who think like a child and treat other people like children. You know, when the left brain's dominant, it causes people to become like masters, thinking that they're somebody's parental figure. When the right brain's imbalanced, it causes people to act like children, thinking that they're someone's property or ward. You know, blind belief can be brought on by chronic right hemispherical imbalance. People will believe anything. Religious extremism. You know, the whole religious worldview is largely born in the right brain. And, you know, part of this is thinking that God is controlling everything and there's no such thing as free will. I had somebody tell me there's no such thing as free will, that we don't have free will. I said, you're absolutely wrong. We have free will. We just don't have free will without consequence. You have to exercise free will, choose, make a choice, and then act. And if you chose the right action, then the consequence will not be suffering. If you chose the wrong action because you didn't know the difference between right and wrong, the consequence will be suffering. That's how natural law works. Natural law is the deterministic component of creation. Like gravity, it's determined. It's operating. You're not going to stop it from operating. You're bound by it. Doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Doesn't matter whether you know about it or not. It's very cold and impersonal. Natural law doesn't care about you. People want to think that the boundary conditions of this universe are so loving and caring. They're not. They're impersonal forces that the Creator set into motion and then doesn't interfere with, because they're the perfect boundary conditions for the acceleration of our evolutionary development. Once we recognize that they exist and that we are bound by them. They're not prison conditions. They are there to help and guide us. The boundary conditions called natural law that are existent in the universe. Though that's the deterministic aspect of creation. This war between determinism and randomness is also dialectics. Both are present. Again, I talked about this on day one, or the second show. The deterministic component of creation is natural law. The randomness aspect of creation is free will, which we are gifted with. Because the Creator does not interfere with our choices. We have free will to act how we will. But it is governed by the deterministic aspect of creation called natural law, which is the governing dynamic of behavior. Again, the people who are so naive don't think that there's free will, and they don't think that there's natural law. As if everything else in creation is going to have governing principles to set it into motion and guide it, except human behavior. That's completely, not affected by law. That's exempt. So this religious extremism as part of right hemispherical imbalance, comes largely from this determinism that people believe in. Oh, God controls every aspect of creation, including free will, and free will is an illusion. No, free will is not an illusion. People who want to think that want to give away personal responsibility to choose right action over wrong action. and therefore they want to say, I don't have free will. You have it, just like you have an arm, a heart, a head, whatever. It's yours. You can't pull your heart out of your body and still live. It's yours forever. You can't take your brain out of your head and still live. So you can't give away your personal responsibility. You can't take that away from yourself. It's an illusion to think that you can. It's yours and you're stuck with it. Get over it. Grow up. And this is the problem. That people actually believe these things. They actually believe that there's no free will or that there's no natural law. The people in super left brain imbalance don't believe that there's any such thing as natural law. The people in super right brain imbalance don't believe there's any such thing as free will. And these things play off against each other. You have people like Stephen Hawking in such left brain imbalance thinking that he's intelligent. He doesn't have a drop of intelligence. Not a drop. Stephen Hawking is a super intellectual. Maybe far beyond anybody else in the world. But he has not a lick of common sense or real intelligence. Not a lick. And I tell that to Stephen Hawking's face. The book he just wrote, talking about in the very first chapter that there's no such thing as free will. That free will is dead like God is dead. I mean, you gotta be joking. And people look up to this guy and think he's intelligent, that he's smart. Not a drop of intelligence. You got no common sense there, Stevie boy. None. I don't care how intellectual you are. That's not what intelligence is. You don't understand how it works and you think you do. Because you are a worshiper at the altar of scientism and the primacy of matter. Hey, we'll look deeper into the core of the atom, the nucleus of the atom, and we'll find all the secrets of the universe. Good luck with that, Steve. Enjoy what you get. Because you're not looking into the place that's the only place you're ever going to find that answer, and that's the human soul. So, continuing with what right brain imbalance is it leads to slave think. When you're in this state of mind, naive, like a child, believing anything, okay, you are apt to accept all kinds of erroneous claims by dominators and controllers. And therefore you will go into the state where you don't exercise your free will, where you don't exercise your rights, and you just accept. And this is key to this whole presentation, is understanding this part of the brain, the imbalance generated by the right brain. When you're chronically in the right brain and never are engaging left brain functions, you'll never stand up for yourself. You will accept slavery. And this is what the New Age is all about, which is why I say I find the New Age movement infinitely more dangerous than Satanism. When people are reeled in by LaVeyan Satanism or Satanism a la the Temple of Set and other schools of ideology such as that, it's dangerous. It's a very dangerous ideology. But let me tell you something. At least Satanists don't think that they're slaves. They want to be the masters. You know? Not that I'm saying that's right either. But I'm telling you, if everybody thought like that we're all masters and we're all kings and I don't want my rights trounced on, the world might get a little bit ugly, but it wouldn't be as bad as having the super form of right brain imbalance when you won't stand up for your rights or even think you have any. You know, I'll take people who believe in Satanism in the modern day, the mini-me version of Satanism, as I call it, not the super elites, you know, Satanism and Luciferianism. I'm talking about people who buy into the interface at the ground level, at the level of the public, that is called Satanism. The recruitment system. I'll take those people any day over the New Age movement. And what the New Age movement doesn't understand is their religion is put into effect at a higher level by the Luciferians that are ultimately controlling the whole planet. They're the ones who are putting these erroneous notions about the laws of attraction and natural law and spirituality into the world, so that real spirituality will never actually be fostered. And therefore their power structure will never be challenged, because they're holding people in right brain imbalance by propagating this new religion, this quote-unquote new religion. There's nothing new about it at all. It's a eons long strategy, and they've been doing it for thousands and thousands of years, putting people into right brain imbalance through religion. And this is just the new world religion. That's it. The old religions aren't working anymore. They need to come up with something new. That's all the New Age movement is. Hence, quote unquote new, because it's just another religion. And religion means to buy or to tie up, tie out of the way, hold back, thwart from forward progress. We'll get into that in a moment. Let's move on to the next slide. When these two parts of the brain come together, that's what this slide was about. That's when the true all-seeing eye is ignited. The blazing star, the all-seeing eye, the true spark of the divine within us. That's born of true intelligence and conscience. The heart uniting with the mind. The mind, intelligence, the heart, conscience. This is bringing all of these different aspects of the human together as whole, as a whole. We're not divided anymore. Becoming a true individual means you're whole, individuated, non-divided, not separate. You become one with yourself, with the higher aspect of the self. And only when we do that are we truly activating the heart as well. So I don't want people to think this is just about the brain either. This is about activating care within yourself. What you care about, what you pay attention to. And that does feed into the law of attraction. Not the way a lot of people think it does, though. Let's look at that was slide number 5. Okay? Slide number 6. Again, simply explaining more about mind control via brain imbalance. Let's look at the other structures of the brain. We're talking about the neocortex, which is supposed to be the executive command function of the brain. It's supposed to be the command center of the brain. This is where we're supposed to be guiding our actions from. When there's a specific form of brain imbalance, one of the other two complexes within the brain exerts what you could probably just simplify and call executive control. In other words, this other complex within the brain sort of takes over and becomes the ruler of the individual, when in fact it's not supposed to be acting in that capacity. It's supposed to be acting when it's needed, okay? And it's supposed to be in balance. These two other parts of the brain are supposed to be in balance with each other. And when one side of the neocortex goes into a form of chronic imbalance, we'll see, one of these other parts of the brain become chronically dominant among the whole triune part of the brain, the whole triune complexes within the brain. So these three complexes are the human brain, the mammal brain, and the reptile brain. And all of them are important. None of them should be downplayed. They're all necessary for our growth and development and interaction here in the physical form. This is what we need to understand. It's not about destroying any parts of these complexes of the brain. It's about using them in their proper aspect, in their proper role. And again, this is the temple, the so-called Temple of Solomon. That's why you always see 3 stages to any initiatory mystery traditions. It's a reflection of these 3 parts. It's a reflection of the 3 components of consciousness: thought, emotion, and action. Thought, governed in the higher order thinking of the human brain. Emotions, largely governed in the limbic system, the mammal brain, the mammalian brain. And then action, movement, survival instinct, governed by the R complex. All necessary components to function and to express consciousness. None of them should be, the 2 lower parts of the brain should not be chronically dominant. So let's explain how they become chronically dominant. They're there to perform a vital function, but they're not to rule the house. The house needs to be ruled by the human brain in a state of balance, the higher brain, the neocortical brain, or what is actually really known as the telencephalon. But that's the whole gray matter part of the brain up on top. The neocortex is actually the outer area in which neural activity largely takes place. So when the left side of the brain is in a state of chronic imbalance, what happens is the limbic brain, the mammalian brain, the brain that governs emotions, is shut down. That's why a dominator doesn't have any compassion or emotions. The part of the brain that actually sends out the chemicals and the neuropeptides that help us to experience emotion in the physiology is not working properly. It is basically largely shut down. It becomes suppressed. So chronic left brain or masculine dominance creates suppression of emotion and eventually roots us into the reptile brain. The executive command function center of the brain stops being the higher brain. It stops being the human brain or the neocortex, and those command functions get rerouted. And now we're being ruled by the R complex or the reptile brain. That's what a dominator becomes like, a reptile. Instinct, action only, survival, my way, hoarding, authority. I'm going to take what I want because I can. I'm going to do what I want to you because I can. This is somebody who's sick in the left brain. They're trapped in the left brain. They've been firewalled off from the other half of themselves, the sacred feminine component. They've been cut off from their emotional qualities because the actual limbic brain is damaged. It's not functioning electrically properly. It's like a computer. The part of the logic board is broken. It's not going to function properly. These people are ill. They're sick. They literally have brain damage. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that metaphorically. It's physical brain damage that is provable. So what happens in the opposite instance? What if the right brain hemisphere is chronically dominant? What happens in these three major structures within the brain, these three complexes? And again, this is a very simplified model. The brain's actual operation is a lot more complex than this. But in general, this holds true. I'm not telling you this is all there is to know about neuroscience. I'm telling you this is the most important thing to know about neuroscience because it generally gets the picture of how the brain operates in a big way to people. And yes, this does hold true, and this is how the qualities of the brain function together with each other. When the right hemisphere is chronically dominant, the opposite happens. Okay? The same thing happens in the sense that the neocortex stops acting as the executive command functions of the brain, the command center of the brain, as it is intended to be when it is in a state of balance. When the right brain hemisphere is chronically imbalanced, and that's where, the only functions that we're using, we're not using the left brain, the R complex loses its power. That's what becomes suppressed. So the survival instinct is suppressed, the person won't stand up for themselves or their rights, and the kind of executive function of the brain gets shunted to the limbic brain, or the emotional part of the brain. And this person becomes ruled by fear. They become ruled by their emotions. It's the kind of person who will take offense to everything you tell them, try to tell them. It's the kind of person who gets scared real easily at the first thing that they hear that's unpleasant. The person that doesn't want to look at unpleasantries taking place in the world. They think that by ignoring them or putting their head in the sand, somehow that's magically going to go away. They bought the total new age bullshit notion that, by paying attention to something and becoming aware of its existence, you're somehow magically giving it power over you, which is total nonsense and could not be further from the truth. So the chronic right brain dominance, the feminine side of the brain, creates the suppression of our survival instinct, and it eventually roots us in the mammalian brain, in which we are ruled by our emotions. And you'll notice, if we're ruled in either one of these other centers, these other complexes of the brain, either the reptile complex or the limbic brain, what are you largely incapable of doing? Thinking clearly with the higher part of the brain that governs higher order thinking. So you're never going to understand patterns that are taking place. You're not going to know what's going on within you, because part of you is broken and needs healing that you can't even see physically. It's not a physical injury, but it is a physical injury. It's not a physical injury that's easily seen because it's inside the head, in the brain. And because people know nothing about how the brain works, they don't understand the majority of people are walking around with brain damage. And I'm not saying that metaphorically or symbolically. I'm saying that very literally. So we don't want to be ruled by either part of the brain, because when the left brain is chronically dominant, the person becomes somebody who thinks that they're a master of other people. I call this master think. When the right brain is chronically imbalanced, you end up with a population that won't stand up for their rights. They don't have enough self-respect. They don't care about themselves enough to say, no, this is wrong. It's not going to continue, even if it comes to the point where I have to use physical force to stop this. And that's called a willing slave, ladies and gentlemen. Somebody who will not stand up for their rights is a willing slave. I don't care why you're doing it, whether, just because you're a coward and you can't develop conscience, you're ruled by the emotional part of the brain, and you don't have any true self-respect to stand up for yourself and say no. And that's what the New Age movement is all about, making more people like that. That's why they want to propagate it as the New World religion, because they want people in this slave think mindset to accept slavery and to accept other people as their rightful masters. And you need to see no more evidence of this. Go to a New Age expo. I don't care where the New Age expo is in your area, just go to it and ask the people there, do you think government is legitimate? The concept of government. And almost every single person will say yes, because they're good little willing order following slaves who don't understand their sovereignty and think that they're spiritual, think that they've come into some spiritual knowledge because they can sit in a lotus position and meditate for 4 hours a day. Well, that isn't real spirituality. Real spirituality deals with freedom. And anybody who is a so-called self-help person, a so-called guru, a so-called New Age teacher that is not teaching people that the goal of spirituality is true freedom, sovereignty, and a balance between the brain hemispheres, understanding both the non-aggression principle and the principle of self-defense, is no teacher at all. They are a deceiver. They are either a dupe who has bought a deception and is now propagating it unknowingly because they're not in a place of true knowledge, and you shouldn't listen to them if you have any discernment. Or they're a direct deceiver who's peddling this bullshit deliberately to try to deceive other people and turn them into people who have slave think operating inside of them. Okay, so let's move to the next slide. This brain imbalance toward one brain hemisphere or another, this is slide number 7 now, is the goal and the dream of the dominators of this world, of the occultists. So I want to just tell you a brief story. When I was involved in Satanism, and I was attending satanic rituals at different locations, largely in Pennsylvania and Maryland, some of the higher level Satanists, or what you might call Luciferians, I don't know if they were that high up in the hierarchy, but people who were like, whose house the ritual was at, or friends, good friends of them, or people who were coming in to be a guest and witness the activities of the grotto, were telling people that they were very influential in the publishing community for the New Age, and telling people, wait until you see the information. And I'm talking about, we're talking about here the mid-1990s, telling people about all the books and all the information that they were going to be publishing and peddling through the so-called New Age movement. And they said, we're behind this. We're doing this because it's pushing people into the form of imbalance that we want to push them into. I didn't understand it at the time because I was still in their mindset. I was still in the mini-me satanic mindset. This form of Satanism that is pushed to the public. Again, it's a recruiting center. It's recruiting grounds for psychopaths, for people who have psychopathic tendencies, which at that time, yeah, I would admit I did have tendencies toward becoming a secondary psychopath. My brain was messed up before I was able to heal it. And they were telling some people in side conversations after the ritual, because somebody brought up what New Agers think and believe, and openly telling people, we're responsible for a lot of that material. We're putting it out there. And I believe them because they said, wait until you see what will be coming out in the next few years. We are going to give people completely erroneous notions of the laws of attraction. We're going to give people completely erroneous notions of how people create their reality, because they know how this works. They know natural law. They know how it works. See, these are people who are so hateful of the fact that natural law exists. They look at it, their worldview is